it is indeed. It's also quite symbolic, right? That we're talking about net zero and the challenges and that there's like a countdown clock in the middle of the room here. So maybe that's a good one to start with the urgency of time. Indeed, I want to tell you guys a little bit more about this Gen Z perspective about how we move along with these challenges. Just before I do that, does everybody know what a Gen Z is? Can I see hands if you know what it is? Generation Z? Okay, I see most people know it. To those of you who don't know it, it's the notorious generation that is like glued to their iPhones or smartphones all day on it, doing the TikTok dances. It's basically anyone born after 1995 all the way to 2010. So quite a broad group. And I'm going to tell you guys a little bit more about that. But before I do, I actually want to take you guys along with me and bring you back to an encounter I had at the United Nations back when I was a youth delegate. Now, this was in 2019. It was in September, and I was attending the UN Climate Action Summit. Now, back at this conference, it was a very interesting one because most heads of state were present at this conference to make new climate pledges. So the place was basically roaming with world leaders, business leaders, activists, citizens, just people that are interested. So basically the whole shebang. Very busy, and I was there as well. Now, I remember the very first day of this conference. It started on a Monday. I woke up very early. I had breakfast, was all prepped and ready to go. I checked like 20 times whether the blue badge that you then get to access the UN was still around my neck, which luckily it was. And then basically I ventured out on my way to the headquarters of the international organization. Now, once I got to the UN, there was this security guard with these big black sunglasses who nudged me in without so much as taking his eyes from the blue pass that hung around my neck. I got in the building. I entered the General Assembly Hall, scanned for the placard that read the Netherlands, and then I sat down behind it and I waited for the conference to start, which it did. Soon enough, I was listening in this hypnotized fashion as all these speeches were being made. I mean, hypnotized, I listened to words like, "Dear Madam Chair," and people saying, "Strive to deepen our knowledge." And this one was definitely a public's favorite, a fan favorite, people saying, "Raising awareness." But to the question whose awareness exactly needed to be raised, the answer didn't seem to matter that much. And at the start of my mandate, I remember that all these big words were pretty impressive to me, but I also knew that they could be paper tigers. So soon enough, I was listening to this paper slush of words during the conference in all the pledges that were being made. At some point, the program continued, and there was also this famous or infamous, it depends on which side you stand, speech made by Greta Thunberg. I don't know if you all recognize it, but it was the "How dare you" speech. Can I see hands if people recognize that one? Okay, I see most people do. Even over there, amazing, Tom, so active. But that speech was being made, and I can tell you, after that speech was made by Greta at the UN, it was the discussion of the day. The entire day, and also days that continued, everyone was speaking about it. There were people that were very much impressed by her openness on that stage, but there were also some people that had a lot of criticism to the tone of voice that she had. And I encountered one of those people in the break that day, because in the basement of the UN, you have this small corner where you can get coffee. And during the program, at some point, I stood there in line and I stood behind this tall man who was also present at this conference, and we got to talking at some point. Now, he asked me what my role was at the conference, and I told him that I was there as a youth representative. And I can tell you that as soon as the word youth had left my mouth, his bushy eyebrows contorted into this deep frown. "Oh," he said. Then there was a super awkward silence, and I said, "Yeah." And at some point, he finally interrupted the silence only by giving me the very kind words that followed. Basically, he told me, "You know, it's all nice and stuff with you young people, but I think we've seen today that it's better if you guys just wait until you're a little older before you join into these discussions. You can basically see that you're way too emotional to deal with these real life issues." Ouch. So then we got in a fight, obviously. No, I'm just kidding. No, but basically, this wasn't the first time that I had heard someone say this. Obviously, everyone was talking about it since Greta had made that speech that day. But also, in other instances, people have continued and still say that my generation is too emotional, that we're too weak. And sometimes we get all these sentiments bundled up in this nice word by calling us snowflakes. I don't know, does anyone know the term snowflakes? I see a couple of hands. To those of you who don't know the word, it basically means that you melt at the earliest inconvenience of the real adult word. It basically means that you can't stand the heat and you basically melt right away. So that is what we were being called. And basically people were saying, you're too weak, you're too emotional. That is not a way to lead. Now, to me personally, I have never seen that openness that I see many climate activists at the forefront display as a weakness. If anything, I've always realized how much more courage is infinitely ingrained in showing how you are affected by things. It is infinitely more courageous to show that something affects you, that you care about something, that it's doing something with your emotional state or with you as a person, than it is to just pull up this wall of apathy and pretend like the state of the world isn't really affecting you and, you're all above it. So I think that is exactly what has been missing in our leadership so far, openness. And I think openness in its purest form is all about transparency. And I think that transparency can be made very tangible in leadership nowadays. What is it that we should strive for then in leadership in the corporations that we work for, that we lead, perhaps the activism that we do? I think one way to make it very tangible is to showcase the impact that you're having on the world. We already know that we can no longer continue to live in a world in which all the negative consequences that, for example, businesses have go unchecked and are then remedied at huge cost by governments, for example, with big plans. So, earlier we heard Michel speak about the true price, right? The social impact that we're having on the world, the environmental impact. These things should transparently be showcased and disclosed. And, this can be done in so many forms. You could do it by showing the true profits of your company, show the true cost that you're having on the environment, on the social elements. You can do it on a product level with the true price for a product. And I even think that transparency in itself, it inherently has value. But I even think that we need to strive for the sort of transparency that also leads to transformation. So there should be accountability and responsibility in our leadership as well to say, hey, this is the impact that we're having on the world. We're going to try to remedy those effects. So the environmental costs that we'll have, we'll take the bill for it and we'll try and either prevent those impacts, restore it if we can, or fine if there's no other way, then we fine it. But this is the sort of transparency that we need, the sort of transformational transparency that can really lead to a difference. Now, from this sort of mission and this sort of ideology, together with some other people, I also co-founded a network. It's called 2100. And basically, we're an intergenerational network that exists out of young people and out of current executives and non-executives from companies within the Netherlands. And together, we try to embody this message and we try to make sure that we get this transparency central in the corporations that we have, the businesses that we're a part of, but also the governments and other actions that we take in that respect. And if anything, I think that transparency is being pushed by this new generation. I think it is vital, and I think it is the only step forward that we need to take if we really want to get to transformation. So yeah, to answer your question at the very start, Ali, if I talk about the Gen Z revolution in the boardroom, it's all about transparency that ultimately then leads to transformation. Thank you so much for listening.